Hello guys and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about a username and password generator using lists. Now lists actually won't be used that much throughout this video. The main focus is recursive functions again. But we're also going to add lists because, that was the purpose of this unit. So basically how this is going to work is we're going to generate a username for them. If they don't like it, they can keep on asking for a username until they find one that's good. They do the same thing for the password, and then you print out their username and password. And we have different algorithms. We have different ways of printing out both the username and the password. So let's get right into it. Make sure you pay attention. There are four main functions. They're very similar, but you should also pay attention to how they work. And I'll get into that in greater detail. Now we're going to be getting into the lists. So there's an adjective list, animal list, and noun list. And you can make cool usernames out of them, such as Fiery Scorpion Eater. And then we're going to add a number at the end of it. And then finally, we're going to have two variables, current username and current password. And these are empty because they're going to be changing throughout the course of this program. Okay, now let's get into the first two functions. First, before getting into the specifics, it's always good to think generally what we're trying to do. This is called abstraction because we're making a very complex problem very simple for us to understand. First, we print out the backstory, the general idea of what our program does. Welcome to the username and password generator, blah, 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 blah. And then we ask for the username. We ask for the username until they give us one that they like. And then we ask a password till they give us one that we like. And then finally, at the end of it, we print out their username and password. So if you look at it like this, it's very simple and it makes things very easy to understand. And that's what abstraction is. And that's why functions are very useful. Now, inside these functions, it's pretty hefty. So let's look into the username one. Right? So this is the ask for username function. Let's go through this step by step. When called, we prompt the user to ask for a username until he's satisfied, then move on to asking the password. So first we have to make the current username global or else we can't change it within the function. I talk about this a little bit in my text adventure series, so if you're kind of confused on why that is, you can go check that out there. Next, we print out the generated username. We store it in this temporary variable because we're gonna, like, let's say they like it, we're gonna store that in the current username, which you can print out down here. So then after we generate a username, we print it out, then we need to ask the user if they like the username. Was this username sufficient? Enter Y or N. If they enter Y, we can save it into current username and then move on to ask for password. But if they say anything else, then we assume that they don't like the password. And this is where the recursive functions come in. We say, no, here's another one, and then we ask for username again. Then we print out another username, we go through this entire process, they don't like it, we go through this entire process until they find a username that they like. This is why recursive functions are very helpful. Later on, you'll get into something called while loops, which does essentially the same thing. And it might be easier for some, it might be harder for some. I personally like recursive functions. It makes things easy to understand. Next, we're going to go to the ask for password after we ask for the username. And honestly, it's the exact same thing. We first global current password this time. Then we have a temporary password variable. We print it out. We say, is this sufficient? Yes. Then we store it. No. Then let's recurse or let's go back to the beginning and keep on asking you until you get a password you like. Now you might be wondering, how exactly are we generating usernames or passwords? Well, this is where abstraction comes in again. So we know we have a function called generate username. We don't know what it does, but we know that it gives us a good username. And then we can, make this ask for username function. And this is why sometimes it's helpful to do the easier parts first, the parts where you're asking the user for stuff, instead of thinking about the logistics of, oh, how are we going to create the username or password? Sometimes it's better to do something called a top-down design. Sometimes people like coming up with the algorithms for just generating the username and password. That's called a bottom-up design. You've probably heard this like in any art thing, like music, drawing, painting, graphic design. Coding is an art in my opinion, so same thing. So now let's get into the generating username and generating password functions. Here we are. So the generate username function looks way smaller than the generate password function. In fact, there's only one line, but it's very complicated and it could be split up into a lot of different lines. I just felt like it's cleaner and neater just to write it in one line because you can. So let's talk about this. What choice does is it selects a random element from this list, and basically it's a value. It's a random value from this list. Like choice adjective list could one time return fiery, another time return blazing. So basically first we add a new line character, just to space things out a bit. Then we find a random word from here. We find a random word from here. We find a random word from here, the noun list. And then finally, we turn a random integer from 100 to 999 into a string. So an example of a username that could be generated from this is Fiery Scorpion Eater 333. Another time it could be Dazzling Frog Eater 67. Or no, it couldn't be 67. You could make it 67, but like 670, because right now I'm just doing it between 100 and 999. The generating password is where it gets tricky. I do want you to pay attention, but you'll learn more about this in the loops chapter. So you can come back later if you still don't get it, but you're going to be learning this very soon. Okay? So first we have a length. So the password we're going to generate, it's going to be completely random, all the words and letters in the length. So the length is going to be a range from, I'd say, 8 to 16, because I think that's how big strong passwords are. Nothing less, nothing more. And then we initialize password, we add a new line character because we want to make things neater. And then this is the new part, for I in range length. So ignore for I, just look at this range length part, okay? So I is used for something later on, so don't worry about that. But basically, we're just gonna do whatever's down here, right? We're gonna do this however many times length is. Like let's say length is 9, right? Then we're gonna repeat the code down here 9 times. If it's 14, we're gonna repeat it 14 times. And that's why this type of loop is very helpful. And you'll see that a lot in our future videos with loops. You'll see how much more we can do with for loops. So first we loop this code, let's say 9 times. And each time we're gonna add a random character to this password. It could be a number, it could be a letter. The way we decide is we again do choice and we choose between number and letter. So we have two options, either a number or a letter. If the type is a number, then we basically add on to the password. You do password equals password plus randint from 0 to 9. We add a random number from 0 to 9 at the end of the password. If it's not number, then the only thing it could be is a letter. And therefore, we will add a random lowercase or uppercase letter to it. And ASCII letters has, from all the lowercase and all the uppercase combined. Instead of just doing ASCII uppercase and ASCII lowercase, it's a combination of those two lists. And that's another thing. Strings are lists. They're a collection of items. So you can do whatever you can do with lists, you can do it with strings too. And you'll see that maybe in a later video. So this is basically it. Let's run the code and see how it works. Welcome to the username and password generator. Please generate as many usernames and passwords as you want until you find a sufficient one. Dazzling Rabbit Killer 555. Is this username sufficient? No, I don't like it. Fiery Rabbit King 355. Now that's pretty juicy, so I'll go with it. And then the passwords, you might think, oh, I'm never gonna remember that. But Google does the same thing. Google generates you a random string of numbers and letters and special characters, and then they just save it for you. So for the sake of this video, we're not gonna make it too complicated. We're just gonna keep it at this. But if you want, you can do it just like you did the username generation. You can do it like a password generation with like, easy to remember passwords instead of this. So let me just generate one that's pretty short. That one looks pretty short compared to the last one, so I'll say yes. And at the end, we get our username and password. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please ask. The source code will be down in the description. So I'll see you guys later. Hope you guys enjoy this video. Hope you improve this in some way. And I'd love to see it in coding submissions. Bye.